Hello again, or for the first time. I'm Angela, and I read all types of genres and age groups of books, but I will say I tend to gravitate more towards fantasy. And this video was inspired by my friend Kristin, who is a fellow booktuber at Perks of a Bookflower, is her channel. I will link it. And she is starting to get into fantasy. And this prompted a discussion and thought about what are some good books for people that are new to the genre. I have some book recommendations for you. So if you are new to fantasy, you want to transition into trying fantasy, or you just want more good fantasy recommendations, this video is for you. I'm gonna organize this by sections and subgenres. I will put timestamps down below if you're more interested in one or the other. I'm going to start with middle grade books because I feel like they're already so whimsical and fantastical, and they're not as super complex as high fantasy books, so they could be a great starting point. I also want to talk about some retellings of fairy tales that I thought were really well done, and it was nice because with retellings you kind of already know what to expect a little bit. Then there is magical realism, which is set in our realistic world with magic in it and hints of magic, so it's not a brand new world to learn. So those are really nice to start with as well. And then the last category will be light fantasy. Okay, let's start with middle grade. The first series that I recommend is Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky by Kwame Mbalia. This is such a phenomenal, it's a series, but so far 2 books are out. It's so good to listen to on audiobook as well. The narrator does great voices for different characters and really brings Tristan and his inner thoughts to life. I really want to sell you on these middle grades, so I'm going to read the synopses so that you make sure that you get the full picture and it hooks you because they're so good. 7th grader Tristan Strong feels anything but strong ever since he failed to save his best friend when they were in a bus accident together. All he has left of Eddie is the journal his friend wrote stories in. Tristan is dreading the month he's going to spend at his grandparents' farm in Alabama, where he's being sent to heal from the tragedy. But on his first night there, a sticky creature shows up in his bedroom and steals Eddie's journal. Tristan chases after it. Is that a doll? And tug of war ensues between them underneath a bottle tree. In a last attempt to wrestle the journal out of the creature's hands, Tristan punches the tree, accidentally ripping open a chasm into the mid-pass, a volatile place with a burning sea, haunted bone ships, and iron monsters that are hunting the inhabitants of this world. Oof, I got goosebumps just rereading that and I'm remembering mid-pass. Tristan finds himself in the middle of a battle that has left Black American gods John Henry and Briar Rabbit exhausted. In order to get back home, Tristan and these new allies will need to entice the god Anansi, the Weaver, to come out of hiding and seal the hole in the sky. But bartering with the trickster Anansi always comes at a price. Can Tristan save this world before he loses more of the things that he loves? Kwame Mbalia does such a phenomenal job in this series of really fleshing out Tristan's inner dialogue. It's humorous still, the books are humorous, but it doesn't shy away from addressing PTSD and emotions that you're struggling with. He lost his best friend. He goes to Mid-Pass, which is this world with Black American and African gods that is struggling. It's falling apart. It's suffering through some things. And beyond just the different gods and characters from the stories, it also obviously addresses the history of Black Americans and their culture and stories. That's the ultimate point of this book, is stories. The whole series, it's about stories. And it's so strong, to use his last name, and powerful. And I wish that this book has been around for so long, but thankfully it is now. And there are so many kids and adults that can read it. Like I said, I get goosebumps just reading it and remembering going through the journey and meeting the different characters and going through the struggles with Tristan, because it's not easy. It's not just Tristan jumps in and he's a kid and he can do it all that none of these other gods like High John and John Henry and all of them can't do. No, he struggles too. And I think that's important to show that struggling happens in life, especially PTSD, struggling through trauma and loss and grief. This world is so detailed and intricate, but if you're new to fantasy, it is not something that you won't be able to grasp onto. Storytelling is the epitome of this book, and Kwame Mbalia does a breathtaking, phenomenal job at it. So I highly recommend either the audiobook or the physical book, either one of Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky. Since Tristan Strong is a middle grade series, I'm going to talk about the other middle grade series that I recommend. In this case, 3 of the books are out, and just like Kwame Mbalia's series, this series too, every book is just a winner. This is Nevermoor, The Trials of Morrigan Crow. This is hopefully something that you've heard of, but if you have for whatever reason hesitated to pick it up, let me be the person that encourages you to give it a shot. This book says Morrigan Crow, who is right there, is cursed. Born on eventide, the unluckiest day for any child to be born, Morrigan is blamed for all local misfortunes, and worst of all, the curse dooms her to die at midnight on her 11th birthday. But as Morrigan awaits her fate, a remarkable man named Jupiter North, here he is, Jupiter, appears, whisking her away into the safety of a secret magical city called Nevermoor. It's in Nevermoor that Morrigan discovers she must contend for a place in the city's most prestigious organization, the Wondrous Society. Morrigan must compete in 4 dangerous trials against hundreds of other children, or she'll have to confront her deadly fate. This, oh my goodness, this is a debut? I didn't realize that. I think Tristan Strong was a debut too. I mean, can we talk about how they just knock it out of the park? Wow. This is by Jessica Townsend, by the way. This book is similar in that the world is so detailed and fantastical, and you see so many new elements and new creatures, and so many of these, as they said, very talented, gifted children with many different gifts, and some of them are just so interesting and fantastic. And Morrigan doesn't really quite understand what she's doing here, because as far as she knows, she's cursed. She doesn't have any gifts, but she is having to trust Jupiter North, because what's her other option? To go back and deal with the consequences of eventide? She obviously can't do that. So so many wonderful characters, such a great world. Again, it's exquisite in a way that isn't going to bog you down with too much that you can't process. You don't need to have necessarily like a character name list like I do with some high fantasy. You'll get and pick up on these characters, and especially if you listen to the audiobook. I cannot stop raving about the audiobook for this. It's my favorite, read by Gemma Whelan, and she does an incredible job voicing all of these different characters. Such good and not obnoxious or corny voices. I loved her voices, and I'm pretty picky. Some of them I really can't stand in audiobooks. No, every voice, so well done. Nevermoor is a fantastic middle grade series, as well as Tristan Strong, especially if you, I can't even say especially if you're new to fantasy, even if you love fantasy, even if you don't read fantasy at all. I still say to read these middle grade books. They're so good. Now for some middle grade standalones, at least I don't know that they're planning on being made into a series. So far, they're standalones. And the first one is Elatsoe by Darcie Little Badger. The art, too, I just cannot get enough. It's by Ravina Kai, the illustrations, and they're throughout the book. Like, here's an example. Just beautiful, beautiful. I would personally recommend owning this book because it just feels so good in your hands. I don't know how to explain that, but the binding of it and the pages are, I don't know, this book was just so well made. I love it. But what I love even more is the content of the book, obviously. And again, this is a debut novel. Oh my goodness. I'm so happy that we're getting debut novels here that are all just so good. My gosh. They really deserve it. They deserve these books to be published. So Darcie Little Badger is a member of the Lipan Apache tribe in Texas. And Elatsoe is her debut novel. And I feel like middle grade, some of them are clearly directed at just children of this age that are in middle school. But so much middle grade isn't. Like it's accessible and fabulous to read at any age. And this is another one that it is technically in the middle grade section or young adult. I can't remember which, but you can read it at any time. It's not geared towards youth, if that makes sense. Imagine an America very similar to our own. It's got homework, best friends, and pistachio ice cream. There are some differences. This America has been shaped dramatically by the magic, monsters, knowledge, and legends of its peoples, those indigenous and those not. Some of these forces are charmingly everyday, like the ability to make an orb of light appear or travel across the world through rings of fungi, but other forces are less charming and should never see the light of day. Elatsoe lives in this slightly stranger America. She can raise the ghosts of dead animals, a skill passed down through generations of her Lipan Apache family. Her beloved cousin has just been murdered in a town that wants no prying eyes. But if she is going to do more than pry, the picture-perfect facade of Willoughby makes gruesome secrets, and she will rely on her wits, skills, and friends to tear off the mask and protect her family. This was such a great book. Again, I think this was one that I read in one sitting, and it flies by because you really just want to know what's going on in this small town. This one might fall under the category of magical realism because it does take place, as they say, in this stranger America. It has different, I wouldn't call them creatures, but types of people, characters, abilities that different people have. You get to learn some beautiful, beautiful stories and beliefs of the Lipan Apache tribe. So Elatsoe, fantastic. I almost would categorize it as a mystery thriller, possibly, because of trying to figure out what happened to her cousin. So this is a great one. And then the last middle grade geared book that I'm going to recommend is The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. Once again, of all ages, please read this. It is so precious and funny and wonderful. The synopsis is so funny. Every year, the people of the Protectorate, a town, think of almost like the movie The Village, like that kind of a town, leave a baby as an offering to the witch who lives in the forest. They hope that this sacrifice will keep her from terrorizing their town. But the witch in the forest, Zan, is kind and gentle. She shares her home with a wise swamp monster named Glurk and a perfectly tiny dragon, Firion. Zan rescues the abandoned children and delivers them to welcoming families on the other side of the forest, nourishing the babies with starlight on the journey. Keep in mind, she doesn't understand why they're doing this. She's like, why are they leaving these babies in the woods? It's hilarious. One year, Zan accidentally feeds a baby moonlight instead of starlight, filling the ordinary child with extraordinary magic. Zan decides she must raise the unmagicked girl, whom she calls Luna, as her own. To keep young Luna safe from her own unwieldy power, Zan locks her magic deep inside her. When Luna approaches her 13th birthday, her magic begins to emerge on schedule, but Zan is far away. Meanwhile, a young man from the Protectorate is determined to free his people by killing the witch. Soon it is up to Luna to protect those who have protected her, even if it means the end of the loving, safe world she's already known. The characters shine in this book. A perfectly tiny dragon who doesn't realize he's tiny, thinks he's huge. A girl magicked by moonlight, which is so unbelievably powerful. A witch who's taking care of her and just doesn't understand what the town is doing. And then the swamp monster, who is so wise and old, and they all just make an incredible cast. And it's following a couple of different things happening in the story, and it all weaves together and explodes like her magic does. I'm going to move on to some books that are retellings that I think are really good for someone getting into fantasy. And I believe that because as I said before, if you already are familiar with the story or the plot or the outline of the fairy tale, it makes the fantasy world a lot less difficult to process because you kind of already have somewhat of an idea of where it's headed. So I'm just going to recommend some that I think they did a really good job on. There's plenty that I haven't read, but these are just a few that I think I can give a thumbs up on. This one is a series. It's called the Curse Breakers series. It starts with A Curse So Dark and Lonely. This is by Brigid Kemmerer, and it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. There is Prince Wren, who lives in the kingdom of Emberfall, and he is cursed by the Enchantress to constantly relive his 18th year. It's Beauty and the Beast. If he falls in love, it can break the curse. In the meantime, he turns into a vicious beast, causing destruction. At the same time, there is Harper, and she is a young girl in Washington, D.C. It combines our world and Emberfell. She's having a pretty tough time. Her mother is sick. Her brother is not necessarily getting in with the right crowds, trying to be able to get enough money to take care of her. And she's frustrated because she feels underestimated because she has cerebral palsy. And she knows that she's strong. Just because she has cerebral palsy doesn't mean that she's not. And she proves it because when she gets pulled into the magical world by Gray, who is Prince Wren's kind of like personal guard, that is the only one that knows about the curse and what's going on. She then has to figure out how to survive and adjust to being in Emberfell and dealing with the consequences of his curse and what that is doing to Emberfell. And then also worrying about her family back in Washington, D.C. This one I would describe as a light fantasy because you have Washington, D.C., but then you also have Emberfell, but it's such an easy grasping of the world. There really isn't a magic system. There's the Enchantress, but it's just an Enchantress. So there's not really a magic system you need to learn. There's not really a hierarchy you need to learn. You just know, here's a kingdom. This is what's going on. So definitely recommend that. And it is wrapped up now. It was 3 books, and I loved where it went. I totally enjoyed this whole series. Definitely a great one to pick up if you prefer light fantasy or if you are just getting started on fantasy, and this is a good transitioning book. Series, actually. Then there is one of my favorites. I gave this book 5 stars. This is Forest of a Thousand Lanterns by Julie C. Dow. This is a retelling about the evil queen. There's a sequel to this, and it's from the perspective of the Snow White character. I have not read it because I love the evil queen character so much and her story so much that I don't want to switch to a soft, sweet, innocent perspective of the Snow White character because she's just great. 18-year-old Zifeng is a beautiful peasant girl. The stars say she is destined to be Empress of Fanglu, but only if she embraces the darkness within her. It's a choice Zifeng must make, and carefully. Down one path lies obscurity, and the other leads to everlasting glory, but not without great sacrifice. If she is to achieve greatness, she must spurn the young man who loves her and exploit the callous magic that runs through her veins. And while Zifeng considers her fate, one question, one choice reigns above all others. Is the price of the throne too much to pay? I like what this says. A quote from Marie Lu. It says, a richly developed fantasy world coupled with an ambitious anti-heroine of complex agency. This story shines and surprises at every turn. And I would definitely agree. If you tend to like villains in movies or books, and you like to get to know their backstory and their motivations, this is the book for you. It's great. I also want to recommend The Sleeper and the Spindle by Neil Gaiman. It's short. It's 72 pages long. It is a nice short story that kind of combines Snow White and some of Sleeping Beauty. It's kind of a combination, but I thought it was great. It was such a great story. It says, on the eve of her wedding, a young queen sets out to rescue a princess from an enchantment. She casts aside her fine wedding clothes, takes her chainmail and her sword, and follows her brave dwarf retainers into the tunnels under the mountain towards the sleeping kingdom. This queen will decide her own future, and the princess who needs rescuing is not quite what she seems. Twisting together the familiar and the new, this perfectly delicious, captivating, and darkly funny tale shows its creators at the peak of their talents. My last retelling recommendation is To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. This is a Little Mermaid retelling, and I thought that it did a nice job at taking kind of a darker edge to it. If you like enemies to lovers, this is better. And while there are different kingdoms that you kind of learn throughout, I didn't feel like it was too difficult for me to grasp as someone new to fantasy. So I like it. It says, Princess Lyra is siren royalty and the most lethal of them all. With the hearts of 17 princes in her collection, she is revered across the sea, until a twist of fate forces her to kill one of her own. To punish her daughter, the Sea Queen transforms Lyra into the one thing they loathe most, a human. Robbed of her song, she has until the winter solstice to deliver Prince Elian's heart to the Sea Queen or remain a human forever. And then Prince Elian is the prince that his job is hunting sirens. So when he rescues a drowning woman in the ocean, she's more than what she appears, and she promises to help him and find the key to destroying all of siren kind for good. But can he trust her? And just how many deals will he have to barter to eliminate mankind's greatest enemy? So it's not mermaids, it's sirens, but it's very clearly Little Mermaid inspired. And I wouldn't say it like blew my mind or anything, but it was a really enjoyable, fast-paced read. And if you like things that take place on ships and the sea and in like sea kingdoms, this is a great book. I enjoyed it. It was a great like one sitting kind of read, you know. This series I'm not quite sure what category to put in. It's not a retelling, but I feel like it's kind of inspired by so many fairy tales that I'm gonna kind of nestle it in here. It's more of a portal fantasy story. And it is the Wayward Children series by Seanan McGuire. The books are all really short. If you want to fly through a quick series that is so interesting, the Wayward Children series is for you. In this world, there are doors that will appear to the right child that needs or will fit into that realm. The door goes to a realm, but the big question opens with, what happens to the children that come back? How do they cope with being back in the real world? And can they cope? Are they always going to be longing for their world again? Will the doors ever reappear for them, or are they just doomed to accept that that was their journey and now it's over? And it starts at a school for wayward children, and this school is for children like that. Some of the books do follow each other, but then some of them are just their own story. A big complaint that people have is that they want more. They'll talk about, say, a war with a goblin king, but they want to know that war and what happened, but that's not really the point of these books. These books are a glimpse into this realm and into these characters' lives. If you can accept that, if you can be okay that you're just getting a peek into this journey with them, then you'll probably love it. Another thing that I love about this series is that it has such great representation and diversity. I'm trying to even think of some of the representation. In the first book, we have a trans character, an asexual character. In other books, LGBTQ plus throughout. There is fat representation. There is an intersex character. There's so many of the books, but each one I would hope at least in one of them, everyone can see themselves represented in some way. And each story focuses on a different realm, a different student's struggles. It's a great series. Even though you are learning about multiple realms and people and their stories, it is done in such a compelling and thorough way that I personally didn't feel confused or lost at any time. And I think that it would be a quick, easy, fun, interesting fantasy read for anybody. I'm gonna dip into magical realism now. I only have a few because I feel like quite a bit of the recommendations I've already given, some of them are magical realism too, but some books that are 100% magical realism, I would recommend this author, Sarah Addison Allen. I have read and at some point owned all of her books. I saved these because these three are my favorite: Garden Spells, The Girl Who Chased the Moon, and The Peach Keeper. She's just an author that I fell in love with when I was younger because of the magical realism. It was one of the first times I saw that. And I will say that this truly is that in every essence, because in each one there are sprinkles of magic thrown in, and sometimes it's noticed as strange and sometimes it's just normal and okay for the world and for the characters. So, for example, in Garden Spells, the garden behind the house of the Waverly family, the Waverleys, anything that comes out of the garden has the magical properties to have you do different things. For example, something will help make you be a little more honest if you eat it, or one of them will help discourage attention from someone that you don't want. So essentially she has a catering company where she is well known for her foods, and they are magical. Not that people know that, they just think that they're great food. And there is some family struggles that happen in here when her younger sister shows up with her child. She hasn't heard from her in so long, and she's very much set, the main character is who I'm referring to, Claire. She is very much set in her ways. She likes things done how they are. She has a routine. She doesn't like any disturbances of that. And then when her sister and a kid shows up, and then a neighbor moves in that she might be interested in, her life kind of gets thrown into a little bit more of new things than she prefers. And I love this one so much. I've read this, I can't even count how many times. Also, The Girl Who Chased the Moon. This one is kind of hard to describe. They all take, okay, let me just say this. I don't need to describe each book. They all take place in small towns. If you like the small town atmosphere, if you like looking into people's, peeking into their lives and their thoughts and their struggles, if you enjoy that kind of book with magical realism thrown in, absolutely check out Sarah Addison Allen. And then I have another Neil Gaiman that I have to mention, and that is The Ocean at the End of the Lane. Again, another somewhat short story, but is it my favorite Neil Gaiman? I think it might be my favorite Neil Gaiman that I've read. Granted, I haven't read all of his works, but this one is magical realism. It is about a man who returns to his childhood home to attend a funeral, and he's drawn to the farm at the end of the road, where when he was 7, he encountered a most remarkable girl, Letty Hempstock, and her mother and her grandmother. He hasn't thought of them in decades, quite honestly. Like, he's completely forgotten what had happened. It's a past too strange, too frightening, too dangerous to have happened to anyone, let alone a small boy. As he sits by the pond, a pond that Letty claimed was an ocean, his unremembered past comes flooding back. 40 years earlier, a man committed suicide in a stolen car at this farm at the end of the road. Like a fuse on a firework, his death lit a touch paper and resonated in unimaginable ways. A darkness was unleashed, something scary and thoroughly incomprehensible to a little boy. And Letty, magical, comforting, wise beyond her years, promised to protect him no matter what. I like this little description. A groundbreaking work from a master, The Ocean at the End of the Lane is told with a rare understanding of all that makes us human and shows the power of stories to reveal and shelter us from the darkness inside and out. Now, while a lot of the books that I've described fit in light fantasy, that's kind of a theme. They all kind of have elements of each of these subgenres. But these are ones that I would describe as light fantasy, meaning that they kind of take place in a world or realm that is either ours or is incredibly similar to ours. There are just fantastical elements within it. And I can't have recommendations of books that even people who don't read fantasy should read without recommending The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. The people that I've recommended it to in my real life have loved it, and they all agree with me that it is a book that feels like a hug. I would recommend this book for any age. I would give this to middle grade. I would give this to any end of the spectrum of age, as well as any end of the spectrum of what kind of book that people like to read, unless you're like only strictly into like murder mysteries or thrillers, like this might not be that kind of book for you. But if you are more open and you just read general fiction, this one. That's why it's such a great book if you are dipping your toes into fantasy, because this is so charming. It's so important with the lessons and important comments on life that everyone should know and everyone should think about. I highlighted the heck out of this book. And let me just tell you the synopsis before I keep praising it. But let me just say, these kids, these characters just have your heart and your whole heart. And you feel for them so much. It's just so lovely. So lovely. So Linus Baker is a by-the-book caseworker in the department in charge of magical youth. At 40, he lives in a tiny house with a devious cat and his old records for company, but his quiet life is about to change. Linus is summoned by extremely upper management and given a curious and highly classified assignment. Travel to an orphanage on a distant island and determine whether 6 dangerous magical children are so dangerous, in fact, that they're likely to bring about the end of days. When Linus arrives at the strangest of islands, he's greeted by a series of mysterious figures, the most mysterious of which is Arthur Parnassus, the master of the orphanage. As Linus and Arthur grow closer, Linus discovers the master would do anything to keep the children safe, even if it means the world has to burn. Or worse, his secret comes to light. The House in the Cerulean Sea is an enchanting love story masterfully told about the profound experience of discovering an unlikely family in an unexpected place and realizing that family is yours. I got goosebumps again. Ugh. Just so like let me give you an example of how precious these children are. It's like X-Men, but like totally not. It's very like a lot more younger than X-Men. Like one of the kids is like a garden gnome, but one of them, Chauncey, is like this blob creature, and all he wants is to be a bellhop. Just how more precious can you get? I just want to describe each of the kids to you. Lucy, I mean, honestly, you need to meet these kids. You need to meet Linus and Arthur and just the town and how the town handles having this orphanage nearby and these children and how they are... Can you get where I'm going with this? It's like X-Men. It very much translates to real life and people that are different and how people react to people that are different and how they should react to people that are different. So House in the Cerulean Sea, so precious. Okay, this next one, I am not positive that it's fantasy. In fact, I think it might be science fiction instead because time travel is involved, but I'm going to include it on this list anyway because it is such an important and impactful story. And because there's this fantasy element of time travel, I'm going to include it in fantasy. And because it is essentially also historical fiction, I think that it would be it's not an easy book to read for anyone. Let me tell you what it is first. Okay. Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. Kindred is not an easy book for anyone to read. This is, if you have a heart, if you care, this will be a very difficult book to read, but incredibly important and incredibly worth the read for sure. It is the first science fiction book. Oh, it is science fiction. Okay, well, technically it's not supposed to be on this list, but I'm going to include it anyway because the only science fiction element is the time travel. And to me, time travel is also fantastical. So fantasy, historical fiction, plus if you're used to reading fiction or historical fiction, this would be a good transitional book because it is that, but just with this extra fantastical element involved. It is the first science fiction book written by a Black woman, Octavia E. Butler. It says this combination of slave memoir, fantasy, and historical fiction is a novel of rich literary complexity. Having just celebrated her 26th birthday in 1976, California, Dana, an African-American woman, is suddenly and inexplicably wrenched through time into antebellum Maryland. After saving a drowning white boy there, she finds herself staring into the barrel of a shotgun and is transported back to the present just in time to save her life. During numerous such time-defying episodes with the same young man, she realizes the challenge that she has been given. So Dana keeps getting transported back in time into antebellum Maryland, and as a Black woman, that is incredibly unsafe and terrifying. The real issue too is that half the time every time she doesn't know how long she's going to be there. She has no control over when she goes back and forth. So someday she might be there for 2 minutes, but then other times she might be there for months. And what is she to do for months as a Black woman in America at this time period? It is heart-wrenching, it's challenging, but it is so obviously important to read and know more about what was done to enslaved people, what life was like for enslaved people in America. I feel like I was holding my breath the whole time. I had just this pit and knot in my stomach because you never knew what was going to happen with her safety. And then even worse, the enslaved people that were on the plantation that weren't time traveling, they were there. This was the life of a Black person in America at this time. And it is devastating, horrifying, getting to, I don't want to say put yourself in their shoes because you never could, but to see more in depth and for Dana to experience more because she had already been studying Black history in America and she is now experiencing it firsthand. And there are connections as to why she's going back and why she saved this white boy and why this keeps happening, and there are things that she can't change in the past because it'll change the future. I just think everyone needs to read this book. And as I said, it's a good book for people especially that like historical fiction, but now with the fantasy element. Okay, I've talked at you for so long. My throat hurts. Ready to wrap this up, and I'm gonna end it with some light fantasy that are just so atmospheric. This is Sorcery of Thorns and Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. They both are not high fantasy, they're not too complex, but the atmosphere is what truly shines for me. I just sink into these worlds that she creates. In an Enchantment of Ravens, it is fairies and fairies wanting to make deals and that kind of a realm, a fairyland realm. And in A Sorcery of Thorns, this has to do with magic books and a library. She's a librarian with a friggin' sword. Yeah, librarian sword. Amazing. If you like books, definitely give this a shot. If you're just really in the mood for a light fantasy with wonderful atmosphere that you can just sink into this world, Margaret Rogerson does so well at that. Sorcery of Thorns and An Enchantment of Ravens are my recommendations. And she has a new one coming out soon, which I'm really excited for because I'm essentially just going to keep buying her books. Great introduction into fantasy. I really hope that you can find a book or two in this list that you might hopefully enjoy, that might help give you a good taste of magic or fantasy worlds. And if you have any recommendations for other people, please leave them in the comments so that people can just kind of like scroll down and keep getting more ideas, because I don't necessarily think that every genre is for every person, but every genre can be for every person if you find what you like. You know, if you find exactly what is your cup of tea, then you're good to go. So the more options, the better. Obviously, that's what BookTube is for. We recommend books to each other and try to help the right book find the right person. And as always, I hope that your life is filled with good books and good people, because that's the most important. Take care.